There's nothing like being a member of a crew to make you realize just how important teamwork is to pull off a mission like this. It's really our pleasure to be able to come back at the completion of the mission and be able to share some of the things that went on, the things that we were able to experience, the things that we were able to do with all of you, because we wouldn't have been able to experience them, we wouldn't have been able to do them without all of your help. And each and every person here and everyone that's listening contributes to the mission and in some way, just as each of us contributed in some small way to the success of the mission. This mission was absolutely awesome. I can't tell you how proud I am of all of you for the hard work that you did, echoing Mr. Abbey's comments about how you were working under adverse conditions with the threat and the specter of the furlough hanging over your heads. You were able to pull off just an incredible mission. The things you're able to do, I don't think you appreciate just how great they really are. I'm also extremely proud of the crew that I was able to be a part of to go up and do this. Each of these guys is a pro from top to bottom. They dedicated the last year of their lives to making sure that this all worked, just as many of you have. And I'm extremely proud of all of them. We do have a couple of things we'd like to share with you today. We have about a 15-minute video that we've put together that will highlight some of the parts of the mission. We'll actually tell the story of the mission from start to finish, catching some of the highlights. Unfortunately, we can't capture everything. It would take too long. We'd like to follow that up with a few still shots that we have from different things that went on inside the cabin, and also for some things that went on outside of the cabin, and we'd like to share those with you as well. So if we can go ahead and get the video rolling, we'll go ahead and get started. One of the first things we did when we come together as a crew to learn to work together, I guess, is to design a patch, and we tried to capture all of the major events that are on the mission in our patch. This was our design.
About 3 days before liftoff, we started out on a crystal clear, cold morning on our trip from Houston to Florida. It was a beautiful day, about 6:30. Just wanted to show you what it was like to roll down a dark runway, feel the excitement as we started a 700-mile leg of what was ultimately a 3.7 million mile trip. And I can just remember the excitement in my heart and the thrill to lift off of the dark runway and pop up into the sunlit sky.
As Dan mentioned, it was the start of what was to turn out to be an incredible journey. And 3 days later, after we'd gotten to the Cape, it was time for us to go to work. January 11th, shortly after midnight, the crew started getting ready in the suit-up room. Here you see the pilot on the mission, Brent, Jett, a Navy flyer, was here getting ready for his first flight. Koichi Wakata, whom you've met, joins us from Japan as a mission specialist. Here he is preparing for his first mission as well. The other experienced space flyer on the mission, Dr. Leroy Chiao. You can see Leroy was ready to go. He had a lot ahead of him, and he was very anxious. Winston Scott, Navy captain, who's going to be the flight engineer on the mission, also a future spacewalker along with Leroy. Here he is in his preparation, setting up his microphones and his comm carrier. Last and certainly not least, Dr. Dan Barry, another future spacewalker. And you can tell by the look in his eyes, he is ready to go. While we were getting ready, the vehicle was undergoing its final preparations, and then when we got to the launch minus 3 hour point, it was time for us to depart the crew quarters where we'd been, and walked out, and we were greeted by many of our friends. Some of you are here today, and we appreciate you coming down to wish us well on our journey. We boarded the crew Astro van there for the 20-minute or so ride out to the launch pad to get ready for the ascent, and I believe this pretty much speaks for itself.
We have a go for entry. Booster ignition and liftoff of Endeavour in pursuit of the Japanese satellite.
Houston, now controlling.
1718, roll program, Houston. Roger, roll, Endeavour.
In contrast to the vibration and noise during first stage on the solid rocket boosters, the ride during second stage on the main engines is smooth all the way to MECO. Once on orbit, we had to concentrate on our first major objective of the mission. That was the retrieval of the Japanese SpaceFlyer unit, or SFU satellite. Here you see a good shot of the SFU and with its solar arrays deployed. It was critical for these solar arrays to be retracted and latched prior to the SFU's retrieval. As we closed inside of a half a mile of SFU, you can see Brian firing the jets, primary RCS jets, to slow down Endeavour's closure rate on the satellite. Meanwhile, Koichi and Winston are in the front cockpit, part of the cockpit, monitoring the solar array retraction, which didn't go very well.
Due to the fact that we didn't have latching indication of the solar array panels of the SFU, the Sagamihara Operations Center located in Japan sent commands to jettison the two solar arrays to safely return the SFU to Earth. Brian maneuvered the orbiter to a distance within the grapple range of the shuttle's robotic arm. And then I started to maneuver the robotic arm to grapple the SFU. This is the moment of the capture of the SFU, and this was the end of the 10-month voyage of the SpaceFlyer unit since it had been launched by a Japanese H-2 rocket last March.
You can see Koichi concentrating here as he gets ready to berth the satellite.
After grapple, the SFU was maneuvered to be berthed in the payload bay.
Looks like he's ready to slam dunk that one.
And then orbiter's electrical power was supplied to the SFU's heater system through this electrical umbilical. And it was a great moment, it was a great moment to have accomplished the first of the many objectives of this mission.
Even though the SpaceFlyer unit was our primary satellite, to deploy and retrieve a second satellite, the OAST, was equally exciting. OAST is the Office of Aeronautics and Space Technology satellite. It consisted of 4 experiments which were really pretty much autonomous once we released it. And you can see Koichi working the arm here. Actually, you can see the arm, but Koichi is flying inside. He releases it, and it's going to go into a pirouette maneuver to check its automatic control system, its attitude control system. Now, when we were inside the shuttle, of course, we were thinking about how the satellite was going to perform, which is a very technical thing. It was only after I looked at the film afterward that I could reflect on really the majesty of the satellite. And watch when the Earth comes into view at the lower left-hand side as the satellite does its turn. Then you're going to see the sunlight hit it again, reflecting off of its gold coating. I think it's really something. Brent's flying the orbiter, Koichi's working the arm, Dan's taking pictures, everybody's pretty busy inside, but I tell you, it was really an exciting time. We're backing away from this thing, and again, you're going to see a nice view of the Earth below. Incidentally, this picture of this deployment took place over the Namibian desert in the southern part of the African continent. And take a look at the clouds. Take a look at the synthetic object flying over the natural objects below. I think it was out of sight.
Here we are getting ready for the first of 2 EVAs. Dan Berry is helping me getting into my lower torso assembly, and you can see that in 0G, even getting in your EVA pants can be done 2 legs at a time. And here we are about to come out on the first EVA. I'm opening up the thermal cover and taking my first peek outside. I was prepared for an awesome view, but I didn't expect to really get what I got, which was a big 3D perspective because of all the peripheral vision effects coming in. Here Dan's saying, hey, let me out too. On his feet.
So you
Here we are putting together the portable work platform, one of the major objectives of the first EVA. That'll be used in future station build flights. And here Dan is I'm passing up to Dan the portable workstation stanchion, and he'll put that on the arm.
Here we've deployed the rigid umbilical, which was another big piece of hardware that we were using, and you can see I'm handling this 250-pound mass pretty much with no problems at all.
I think that the essence of a successful EVA is really the same as what Brian mentioned for the rest of spaceflight. And that word is really teamwork. Both inside the bay with Leroy and I, and also with Brent and Koichi as they flew the arm, and also with Houston as we coordinated all the difficult tasks we had to do. Brent and Koichi were able to drive the arm to the place that Leroy and I needed to be at precisely the time that we needed to be there. This was really the high point of the mission for me, both figuratively and literally, as Koichi drove me on the arm up high above the payload bay for me to test some of the work platform techniques that we had practiced.
The second rendezvous of the mission to retrieve the OAST satellite went extremely well. As we closed inside of 600 feet, Endeavour was on a nearly perfect trajectory to achieve the rendezvous. Brian, the commander, must have been feeling really comfortable about the whole thing. He figures it's safe enough to even let his PLT fly for a little bit. You notice the expression on my face as I moved to the aft flight deck. It was a pretty exciting time for me to get a chance to fly the shuttle in close proximity, to another spacecraft. Endeavour flies extremely well. It's very stable. It flies even better than the simulators we have here at JSC. And very soon we were able to maneuver OAST within the grapple range of the robotic arm. The next view you're about to see is from the camera that's on the end of the robotic arm. It's the same view that Koichi will use to affect the capture of the satellite. And you'll watch, and once the satellite stabilizes, you'll see Koichi align the target on the satellite and then smoothly and quickly move in for the capture. And just like that, the man was 2 for 2, and he very quickly had 2 satellites tucked safely in the payload bay.
Now, EVA-2, like EVA-1, was 6 hours and 50-something minutes worth of hardware-intensive EVA. We were evaluating all kinds of tools and techniques that might be used in construction of a space station. Now, this looks like some kind of weird space exercise, but actually what I'm doing is imparting loads to the task plate in which my feet are connected. There's sensors in the bottom of that plate that will sense the loads and make recordings of that load's data. As I said, it was hardware intensive. We had electronic cuff checklists, power tools, rigid umbilicals, electrical fluid line connectors, fluid line connectors, improved helmet lights, you name it, we had it. We had stuff hanging off of us everywhere. We could set off metal detectors from orbit. Now, one of the highlights of this EVA was billed to be a thermal evaluation to test improvements to the suit, but it's time for the truth to come out. The truth is that I was a bad boy, and I was told to go stand in the corner. So I stood in the corner and got cold all morning. I stood in the corner and got cold all afternoon. And I stood in the corner and I got cold all night, and nobody would come out and play with me. No, in all seriousness, the thermal evaluation worked extremely well, and I think we've got a good suit and ready to go build the space station.
Here we are at the end of the second EVA, and while I wait for Winston to button up his slide wire, I've kind of climbed up the bulkhead and taken a peek inside to see what the guys inside are doing. And here we are coming in and closing up the thermal cover and getting ready for the repress for the last time. Need to give that thing a good slam.
After 2 rendezvous, a deploy, 2 successful EVAs, on Flight Day 8 we had some time to appreciate the beautiful views of the Earth, to take some film to bring back to show you all the depth of the colors and the beauty from our perspective. We also did some carefully controlled fluid dynamics experiments.
The commander said, "You better get that and not make a mess of my orbiter."
Splattering coffee on the wall was an automatic airlock depress. Koichi and I also had an opportunity to play the ancient Oriental game of Go, and we brought this along with us really to symbolize connections between past and present and between Japan and the United States.
We could also experience how our body reacts to different kinds of motions in microgravity. As you can see, my smile decreases as spin goes on. Here's the master of karate, Winston Scott. Look how stable his motions are, even though his feet are not attached to the floor.
It's customary in Japan to mark the beginning and end of a large project by filling in the eyes of a Daruma doll. We had already filled in the eye of this Daruma to start the project, and here Koichi and I are getting ready after the retrieval of the SFU to mark the completion of the project. One of the hardest things to do is to say goodbye to a view like this when it's time to come home. We all took our last gazes, closed the payload bay doors, got in our suits, got ready for the deorbit burn. We burned north of Australia. An hour later, we were right here, approaching KSC runway 15. We touched down about 2:40 in the morning. I imagine we woke a few folks up there in Florida with the sonic booms as we came in. As soon as the mains were down, Brent put the drag chute out, and that's our major deceleration device during the rollout. At about 60 knots, he jettisoned it here, and if you'll notice, it falls pretty much straight behind the orbiter, so there wasn't much crosswind that day. And as we roll down the runway, we have those bright lights behind us. You watch me searching for the center line here as I watch the nose move left and right, because we were about 2 miles away from those lights, and it was starting to get dark down there. And it's real important that you stop on the center line. It's the most important part of the mission. But at the end of that incredible voyage, we're now able to look back on it with feelings of great accomplishment. We obviously owe our thanks to everybody that helped put the mission together and helped support the mission. It was an incredible trip. We can't capture certainly can't capture our thanks in words. We can't capture all of the scenes that we saw on film, but we do have a few supplemental film shots now that we'd like to use just to show you some of the other things that went on during the mission.
Even though we did have some pretty good rendezvous footage, one of the things we unfortunately did not capture on video too well is shown in the lower left-hand corner of this slide, and you can just see the corner of the IBM ThinkPad computer. But running on that computer is a software program called the Rendezvous and ProxOps program, and a lot of folks here at JSC worked very hard to develop and perfect that program. It was a tool that we used as a crew during the rendezvous, essentially to help Brian get a little bit better graphical picture of what was going on during the rendezvous and maybe what the orbiter was going to be doing in the next couple minutes. We used this tool fairly extensively, and it helped on both rendezvous contribute to our fuel savings.
We had a number of medical experiments on board to test human adaptation to spaceflight, and here you can see I'm wired for sound. Actually, I'm wired for light. That's a laser on top of my head, and we're testing how our eyes and our balance systems adapt and track as we go through the course of the mission. I don't know how, as the doc on board, I ended up being the one that got stuck by needles from the pilot and had to pinch my nose, but somehow that was the case. And here we're testing how oxygenation occurs in the lungs that's different than on the ground. Basically, there's a different distribution of blood and air in the lungs because of the lack of gravity up there, and you can see how relaxed I am as we go through this TSO.
We don't have a shower on board, the orbiter, as many of you know, but it really wasn't that bad. We didn't, he didn't really need to go all the way to those flips. Another one of the secondaries that we had on board was called a urine monitoring system, and it was a hardware evaluation of the box that was designed here at the Johnson Space Center, and it's intended to be used on future long-duration space shuttle missions and also on the space station for medical research. And it worked very well. Here you can see I had to set up shop to run it there. I've got things surrounding me, large syringes, and unfortunately none of the rest of the guys could use the bathroom when I was doing this, so we had to plan everything ahead of time.
This is another medical hardware evaluation. I don't know how I got put in charge of this one as the pilot, but floating next to just above my hand is a piece of hardware called the Portable Clinical Blood Analyzer, or PCBA for short. On long-duration space flights, especially on station, it's a tool that will allow a doctor or the crew medical officer to take a blood sample from someone who's not feeling well and get a quick analysis of their blood. The two subjects on the experiment, I was the operator. The two subjects were Dan and Koichi, and they weren't real happy when I went to stick their fingers and put their blood in that machine. But it worked real well, and the folks here at JSC did a great job.
Here's a picture of living in space. Once you get up into space, the ceiling and the floor quickly lose their meaning, and you learn to use whatever space is available. Dan and Brian here are getting ready to prepare a meal, and you can see the things stuck out on the Velcro patches along the walls and the other surfaces.
Here's another picture of living in space. One of the questions we most frequently get is, how do people sleep in space? Well, this is one option. You can see Dan in the foreground there in the sleeping bag. The purpose of the sleeping bag, of course, is only to keep your body from floating all over the cabin, because it really doesn't provide support as does a traditional bed. And you can see how his arms float up. It's really weird, but if you totally relax your body in space, your arms will float up in front of you in the manner that you see here on the screen.
Every morning, one of the first things that we did after we woke up is to look through the fax notes sent from the Mission Control Center in Houston. And MCC always kept us informed of the updated schedule and the status of the orbiter and payload systems.
I mentioned earlier that we really enjoyed stealing glimpses of beautiful parts of the Earth when we had a chance. Because of our launch time and our launch inclination, we seem to get Australia about every rev in the daylight, and we clobbered it with film. We took a lot of shots of the entire continent. It's extremely beautiful. This particular shot here is on the northeastern coast, and it's the city of Brisbane. And towards the left center, you can see the Brisbane River running down through the city into the bay. The bay was just an incredible assortment of beautiful blues, different colors. You can see some of the barrier islands there. And looking at Australia from this barren Simpson Desert to the beautiful coastlines was one great experience for us.
This was something that I wanted to show you because it was a real surprise to me to see this. If you look up in a Texas summer sky at sunset, you'll often see the sun as it sets hitting the tops of the clouds. The top of the cloud is bright white. But from orbit, you get a different perspective. When that happens, as is shown here with the sun setting and the sun hits the top of the clouds, they leave a shadow that stretches across the Earth for hundreds of miles. And this was a perspective I'd never seen before, and I wanted to share with you.
We had the pleasure of participating in a question and answer session from orbit with students from South Africa. And one of the things that captured my attention was the beauty of the African continent. We got a picture of the Orange River that is actually the boundary between Namibia to the north and South Africa to the south. And again, the thing that really caught my attention at first was the contrast in colors. You've got the darker colors at the top that represent the higher cultivated ground. And then you can see the results of erosion at the bottom, where the brighter, more orange-looking clay has been unearthed. Again, I just thought it was a very, very pretty picture.
Well, I guess this technically isn't an Earth observation picture, but it's probably the favorite picture, my favorite picture of all the ones we took on orbit. This was taken during EVA-1, and you can see Leroy down in the forward part of the bay on the starboard sill working. In the background, you can see Sharks Bay, Australia, which is on the west coast of Australia. It's pretty interesting. I guess if I happened to take this picture, and I guess if I was talking to my photo instructor, Don, about this, I would try to tell him that I use the spot meter to meter the light in the payload bay and meter the Earth and get the exposure just right so that both the payload bay and the Earth were in proper exposure. And I think Don knows me too well. He'd probably say something about a blind squirrel and a nut. But it turned out to be a real nice picture, and it happens to be my favorite.
This is a real neat picture. This was shot in Brazil, about 120 miles northeast of Rio de Janeiro. And it's interesting for several reasons. You can see the mud from the rain runoff that has gone into the river that is pouring into the ocean there. And you can also see the scallops of the ancient shorelines as the shoreline evolved from centuries ago to its current.
We could not see Mount Fuji because we launched at night from northern hemisphere, and this is a spectacular view of Mount Kilimanjaro, and you can see the vegetation area around Mount Kilimanjaro for coffee plantation.
I have to agree with Winston about the African continent being so beautiful, and I really love it every time I see it. In particular, I love looking at the deserts because you can see the dunes, which actually you can see they're actually moving on the surface of the Earth. In this particular picture here, you can see a couple things. One is some of the hard rock, the lava left over from days gone by. And if you look in towards the lower right center there, you can see there's an old crater there. But the deserts are reclaiming that land as the wind erosion has punched a hole in the rim of the crater, and you can see the dunes and the sand filling in there, and it's probably just a matter of time till that's all reclaimed desert. That pretty much sums up our mission. It has the major events we've been able to share with you, some of the other things that we did on board. Again, we'd like to thank you for all that you did, and I have to tell you that you make incredible things happen, and we certainly appreciate, speaking on behalf of the crew, having had the opportunity to work with all of you. We thank you for all you did in support of the mission, and look forward to doing it again someday. Thank you.